Idea. This is the fourth of the KBA's new series of what you can do with your law degree. Tonight's focus is on juvenile court and juvenile law. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jonathan Guest, the membership coordinator and database admin here at the KBA. Today, we have some pretty special attorneys here from at least our bar. We have both of you are Board of Governors members. We have first Loretta Cravens of Cravens Legal. Loretta got her law degree from UT College of Law, graduated in 2004. Licensed in 2004. I'm not sure when you graduated, but we also have Mike Stanuszek, who also went to UT College of Law, was in the same class, and I just met Loretta on the first day of law school. So these two go way back, and we've got, if I can't think of two better people to pick the brains about juvenile court and juvenile law in Knoxville. So hopefully we'll get some good advice for everybody. So before we get going, there's only a couple of students here, but if you guys have any questions that you want to throw at these guys specifically, feel free to use the chat box, and then I'll be monitoring that and try to get those questions in for sure. So first thing I want you guys to do, Loretta, we'll start with you. Just kind of give us just a general kind of rundown of where you were at when you finished law school, kind of what you started off your career doing, and then the path that led you to where you're at now.
Sure, that's kind of an interesting story. I went to law school thinking that I would be I was shy, thinking that I wanted to be a transactional lawyer of some kind, studied accordingly, graduated and couldn't find a job and couldn't leave Knoxville because my husband had a good job here. So I sent out resumes to every lawyer in town, ultimately landed with a small firm, Eldridge and Blakeney, where I became a criminal defense lawyer, which was not at all what I had planned for myself. But I was lucky and blessed to land there and become a litigator, and oddly enough, quickly lost my shyness, fell in love with that kind of practice, and have basically been doing criminal defense primarily ever since. And juvenile work is something that I have done more and more recently since I started my own firm 4 years ago. I've spent a little more time in juvenile court, not as much as I would like lately, but I think that's sort of post-pandemic repercussions. But that's how I ended up here.
What about you?
All right, so how the hell did I get here? Graduated law school September 1st of 2003, which is the fall semester of my 3L year. I said I was not going to live in my parents' basement when I graduated, so I sent out 257 personalized cover letters and resumes from Traverse City, Michigan down to Miami, Florida, and spent my third year of law school driving because I couldn't afford plane tickets all over the damn U.S. to interview for firms. I probably had 50 interviews, and I got one job offer in Cleveland, Ohio, which is lovely in the wintertime, let me tell you. And I convinced my fiance, now my wife, to move up there with me to Cleveland so I could take this job at this big law firm up there. And about a week after I got up there, realized we had made a huge mistake, but I had only been practicing a week, had to take another bar exam to get out of Ohio. So it took a year and a half for me to apply and sit and pass the Tennessee bar. So as a second year attorney, I had passed my second bar exam, and I moved my wife and myself back down to Knoxville and hung my shingle back in 2006. And in 2008, I had my daughter, and I remember I was on paternity leave. In 2008, up until then, I had never done any juvenile court work at all. And I had my daughter in 2008. And I was sitting on my back porch, and I was on paternity leave, and my wife said she'd take the shift for that day. So I was knee deep in some whiskey, and I had an epiphany, and I said, I want to help some little kids, because I just had a little kid. I want to help some little kids. So when I get off of paternity leave, I'm going to go down to juvenile court and just tell them I can help them out. And so the day I got back from my paternity leave, I went down there and said, if you guys need someone to take court appointments, I'm here to help. And that day they gave me 4 cases. And they said, will you please come back tomorrow? And I came back the next day, and they gave me another 4 cases. And 13 years later, I'm there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, almost every single day of the year. And I love it.
The juvenile court, man, that's what I think everybody thinks be that at this point. Okay, so Stu, we'll stick with you. What kinds of questions would you say students should be asking now to help determine whether or not they would want to pursue juvenile law?
Well, first of all, it all depends on whether you got a job lined up when you graduate law school, because most of the attorneys that practice on a juvenile court are on their own. There are a lot of solos, or they're with a lot of small firms. Your bigger firms like your Baker Donaldsons and your Bassberry, they don't practice in juvenile court. Juvenile court's a bunch of ham and eggers, right? So if you want to actually practice in juvenile court, that's awesome. We'd love to have you, but you need to be making up your mind fairly quickly on whether you're going to hang your own shingle and start your own law firm, or whether you're going to go try to get a job at a small firm here in town. I think that's the number one question that you need to be asking yourself.
Loretta, what about you?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Though I will say that perhaps in some of the larger firms that have vibrant pro bono type programs, if juvenile law is something that you're passionate about, it might be an opportunity for you to approach those firms with the suggestion that you be able to do some of your pro bono work down in juvenile court. Juvenile court is a very unique place, and juvenile law is a very unique practice area. And I don't want to speak for Stu, but one of the reasons that I do it is because I get actual joy and satisfaction out of helping children. And so much of what I do as a criminal defense lawyer is not terribly satisfying or terribly joyful, that I feel like when I can help a juvenile who's in a difficult situation, I'm creating real hope for that child. And so I find it very fulfilling. So you should ask yourself how you're going to balance the tasks that you have as an attorney, the difficult cases, the hard cases, and how you're going to find some joy. And it might be hanging out down in juvenile court.
And it's so much fun. Juvenile courts is so much fun.
Brett actually answered the next question I had. So Stu, I'll throw this one at you. Why is juvenile law important to you? And you kind of answered this in your first answer, but what really played into it being an area of law to focus on? What's the rewarding part of it?
Well, it started off to help little kids, but that has morphed. Like, I mean, it's still to help kids. I enjoy helping the kids part. I mean, that's a good thing when you're finding a home for a kid in foster care and you're the guardian. The reason I like it now, honestly, is because I get to try cases all the time. Like, I mean, in a typical week, I get to have 2 or 3 trials. Now, these are non-jury, right? They're not jury trials, but I get to have 2 or 3 trials. And most of my clients down there, the way it's all set up is the department's going to allege 52 things against your client. They only have to prove one of those 52 things to justify keeping a kid in foster care. So my clients like trying cases because they think that most of the allegations are wrong. And so they're like, do it. And so I get to try stuff all the time. And for me, that's fun.
Would you say juvenile court's about as good a experience as you can get as a young attorney if you want trial practice?
I think it's the perfect court to go to. And the reason is, especially here in Knox County, we have 1 judge and 7 magistrates, and 4 of the magistrates handle the dependency and neglect cases, which means kids got removed from the parent. Most of your cases are in front of a magistrate, which means that if you're trying the case in front of the magistrate and you lose, you get a de novo appeal up to the judge, which means if you're a young attorney and you try the case in front of the magistrate and you totally flop and screw up, you can fix it in the next round because you get a de novo trial. It's as if it never happened. You go down to criminal court with Loretta down there and you screw up, that has a lasting impact on these people for the rest of their lives. If you're a brand new attorney, juvenile court's the place to go. It's hard to do anything down there that is not fixable.
Good advice. I like it. Loretta, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I will add one thing, because I was a young attorney who was very shy initially. There's no audience in juvenile court. You're not going to have any risk of the general public watching you fail. You're just going to have other people who are accustomed to being in juvenile court. So that's good advice, Stu. I agree with that.
just
And
curious. Sorry, go
and
ahead.
the attorneys get along really well down there, right? Because most of the attorneys that practice down there on a regular basis take court appointments. So on a Monday, you could be appointed to represent the dad. And on Tuesday, you're representing the mom. And on Wednesday, you're the guardian ad litem. And you're just playing musical chairs with the same attorneys every single day. So if you're a jerk to the attorney on Monday, they're going to remember that on Tuesday. So y'all have to get along real well. So you are professional adversaries, but everyone off the record is very close knit.
Yeah. Okay. So Loretta, let's stick with you. Just kind of in general, what does the day-to-day work life look like?
For me, it's a little bit different. Most of my juvenile work, at least, is on the delinquency side. So it's in my criminal defense practice area. So typically when I'm down in juvenile court, that means frequently that I have a client who's been detained, who's in the detention center, which means I will have visited my client early, 8:30 that morning at the detention center, spoken to them, explained what the nature of that day's proceeding is going to be. I will have collected, texted, called, rounded up family. It's difficult, I find, to keep my cell phone private in juvenile court because you're sort of herding cats, for a lack of a better term, making sure everyone gets to where they need to be. Then check in at the front information desk there at juvenile court and make sure your witnesses and your client have checked in. And then it's a lot of waiting your turn to have your case heard. Perhaps it's something I'm negotiating with one of the district attorneys that are assigned specifically to juvenile court. Perhaps it's a detention hearing where I'm trying to put on witnesses, or I say put on witnesses, I don't actually mean send a witness to the stand because I'm in front of a magistrate. I'm having family members trying to help me convince the magistrate that my child should be released from detention and a subsequent proceeding set. I think juvenile court for me, it's a little different than what I think Stu does most of the time. I usually have a little more lead time sometimes to handle my cases in advance and to plan for them. But I also have that urgency when I have a child who's detained, so it can become problematic. But juvenile court, most of my cases, I'll be out in half a day.
Sure. Yeah. Stu, what about you?
Yeah, so I'll get there at 8 o'clock, and from 8 to 9, I'm just prepping for my morning. And usually I'm there from 9 till 12:30, and I'll have anywhere between 4 and 6 hearings in that time. I don't take lunch, so 12:30 to 1:30, I'm prepping for my afternoon, and usually I have one trial in the afternoon. And if it's not a trial, it's going to be a hearing that of some significance, and so we're going to be doing something that's contested. So I'm usually there 8 to 5 most days. And I got other stuff going on. So my day is spent between emails, text messages, phone calls, and in and out of hearings.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a typical day.
Yeah. You both are, from my experience, probably two of the more busy people that members of ours. How do you, and Stu, you mentioned you were at the beach last week, which sounded great, but how do you go about, and Stu, we'll stick with you. How do you go about balancing your career and your life goals?
You don't? You don't? I haven't figured out that secret yet. I mean, I try to take time off. Here's the good thing. Let me back it up. It's different for me because I got other things going on. But if I'm a brand new attorney, you can make really, really good money coming down to juvenile court by hanging a shingle and working way less than your friends, right? So the average first-year attorney in Knox County at a firm of less than 5 attorneys is making like $50,000 a year, which is terrible, right? But that's what the market is. If you go down to juvenile court, once you get up to about 30 cases, you can be billing 8 hours a day, and you're allowed to bill up to 2,000 annual hours on court-appointed work at $50 an hour, which is $100,000 in revenue for the year. Now, you're not going to hit $100,000 in the first year, but you're going to hit $100,000 probably starting. You'll hit what you need to hit starting in month 3 through, say, month 15. But once you're there, now you're hitting $100,000 in revenue, which means you are making way more than your classmates that you graduated law school with, right? So I tell young attorneys that it's good to start your law firms and go down to juvenile court, because you can start your day at 8 o'clock and be done at 4:30, making $100,000 a year, whereas your friends might be working at firms and starting at 8 o'clock and work until 8 o'clock and making half as much as you're making.
Sure thing. Yeah. Loretta, what about you?
Well, I have very strong feelings on this idea of work-life balance, which I've been hearing the entire time we've been practicing law. I've never figured out. I think it's a myth. Frankly, I don't think such a thing exists, because there are going to be times where you just have to prioritize one over the other. Now, do I think you need to try to keep the pendulum as close to the middle as possible? Yes, I think that's a good idea. And this is one of the things I love to tell law students, and I include it in my class that I teach to law students, is it is important not to fall into the trap of throwing all of your personal time and priorities away if you are beginning your own firm, or if you're going into a firm with your first job, because that's your first tendency, is to start sacrificing all of your personal time. And I don't mean huge chunks, but I think it's important to kind of maintain that. If you're someone who goes to the gym or runs or exercises, put it in your calendar and treat it like an appointment. I didn't learn that for about a decade of practicing law until like a doctor's looking at me and saying, you're going to have to take better care of yourself. So schedule it now, learn that now. As you're starting out, make that a priority. If you have a spouse or a family member that you need to take care of or spend time with, then make that a priority and find that time, even if it means you're opening your laptop back up at 10 o'clock and working another hour or two while everybody's gone to bed. Maintain those relationships and take a little time for yourself. Don't eat lunch at your desk. Get up, take a walk. Like Stu, I generally don't eat lunch either. I use it for other things, so that I don't have to work as late. But make those small little priorities in your schedule important, and it'll help you maintain a sense of balance even where there may not be one.
Yeah, sure thing. So you look like you have something to add.
I got nothing to add.
Okay.
I love Loretta. I love listening to her. She inspires me. She has for 20 years now.
Sure thing.
The same's true of you, Stu.
Oh,
okay, so we in the registration process, students were allowed to submit questions. I want to kind of hit on some of these. So you both have kind of spoke to this a little bit, but I'm hoping for maybe a little bit more fleshed out answer. Stu, we'll stick with you. So what steps, classes, or experiences would you feel best prepare a juvenile court attorney?
Go down to the courthouse and shadow some attorneys, right? So like tomorrow, I got 3 law students that are going to go watch me in 3 different hearings tomorrow. We have a really good bar association here. We really, really do. And I'm not saying that as a Board of Governors member like Loretta, but it's very, very cordial, okay? There ain't an attorney in town that if you send them an email saying, hey, look, I'm a 2L at Duncan or a 3L at UT, can I come shadow you in court? That's going to say no to you, right? So go down there for a morning and watch how the sausage is made, and you will learn more in that 3 hours than you will ever learn in your class. I promise you.
Yeah, Loretta, anything to add?
100% agree with that. 100% agree. And we are blessed in that way that I think Stu's right. Most lawyers in town will be happy to let you just come follow them around.
So Aaron Stackhouse here asked, who would you contact to go about doing that? I guess more the practicality of what steps to go about doing that.
You can call Loretta or I.
I was going to ask, would you guys mention putting at least your emails in the tab for us real quick? I can write it down.
Sure, if I can figure out how to do it.
You may have to do that for us, Jonathan.
I can. Yeah, either way, I can take care of it for sure. No worries. And okay, so yeah, so I would recommend. We were at a social event the other night, and what did you wrangle up? How many people did you get? You were recruiting people that night too. So there's not better people to speak to about this than the guy sitting right in front of you right now. So.
Seriously, I'm there 5 days next week, 8 hours a day. If you want to come down, you just tell me when you're available. I'll come on.
Okay, so this is kind of a specific question about kind of children within juvenile. Or Loretta, we'll go with you first. So what can you do to best protect children from developing more trauma while in the court system?
Wow, that's a deep question.
Real segue here.
So
Yeah,
happy to ask you first.
Well, I will say our juvenile court has some things in place on its own to try to help mitigate just the trauma of being there. And I suspect the trauma is different on the different ends of the courthouse. But, you know, there are things like teddy bears in the courtrooms. There are comfort dogs, therapy animals that are available to sit with children who may have to testify or be in a stressful situation, and that just walk through the lobbies. Popcorn on Fridays. You know, there are lots of things that the courts do to try to mitigate that. I will tell you that if you walk into the juvenile court it's a busy place. It's busy on both ends of the hall, and you can feel the tension some days in those rooms. So from my perspective, I represent, and I almost always represent the child. So one of the things that I do to try to mitigate the trauma is be very clear in explaining to my client exactly what I believe is going to happen, what the steps are, who's going to be in the room, what the room looks like, what they should say and not to say, make sure they know that I'm there to represent them, which is completely my job. I do not represent their parents. And that all starts with trust building very early on in that attorney-client relationship. So that's my 2 cents from sort of the delinquency side.
Yeah, sure. What about you, Stu?
Yeah, so first and foremost, understand juvenile court's got its own set of juvenile rules, right? So, and I always bring that up because I see fancy attorneys from downtown come down there all the time, not realizing there are these other rules that are very specific to juvenile court. For example, if a minor is under 13 years old, any statements the minor said regarding dependency and neglect, there's a hearsay exception specifically for that. So a lot of times we'll have contested trials, but you'll have a kid that's 10 years old as the declarant. They don't have to testify. The department's CPS investigator gets on the stand and just testifies as to what the minor said. Okay, that's one way to alleviate any distress from the minor, that they're probably not even going to have to testify in this case. The only time, and I represent mostly parents, right? It's very rare. It's not like the movies. It's very rare where I have to put a minor that's under 13 on the stand and have to drill them in cross-examination. It just doesn't happen. Whenever we do have to cross-examine minors, almost always the guardian ad litem has filed a motion to have the parties excused from the courtroom, and so that the only people in there are the attorneys and the minor and the judge. So they're not having to answer in front of mom and dad and blame mom and dad in front of them. So that's the other thing to do. It's not, you know, and here's the other thing. Anyone that practices down there a lot, they don't want to have to cross a minor any more than you would, okay? So whenever I have to do that, I have a very frank conversation with my client. Say I represent the dad and he's accused of, say, physical abuse. I have a very frank conversation with my client. Hey, look, do you want me to go after little 8-year-old Tommy? Is that best for Tommy? I mean, let's look at Tommy's future here and how traumatic that's going to be. Almost every time I have that conversation with my client, they tell me to use kid gloves, okay? Because it's better for their kid, right? It's very rare that I've had to go after minors really, really hard.
Yeah. Aaron asked, is that in an effort to lessen their trauma, or does it have to do with reliability of testimony?
Which part, the hearsay exception or the trauma?
I'm not sure.
Not allowing I guess it's not allowing, but having the guardian testify for them.
Well, the guardian doesn't get to testify for him. What the guardian does is file a motion that the parties are excused from the courtroom. So
I guess I'm confused about what you said. So you don't put children under 13 on the stand, or you do?
No, what I said was there's a hearsay exception so that statements from minors that are under 13 relating to allegations of dependency and neglect that falls under a hearsay exception. So generally, the department can prove their case by calling their CPS investigator, and the CPS investigator can testify as to what the minor said. They don't need to call the minor to the stand and open the minor up for cross-examination.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, sometimes, the flip side of that is, even though there's a hearsay exception, that does not excuse the minors from subpoena. So I can subpoena a minor to testify if my client's hell-bent on me cross-examining the minor. I can do that, even with the hearsay exception. I can put the minor on the stand and force them to answer my questions. But again, most of these parents don't want their kids to go through that, so they give you permission to use some kid gloves.
Sure. Brett, anything to add?
Just two things. I will generally say, I find as a general rule, anytime you're having to question a minor, you should probably use kid gloves. And that's any kind of minor in any set of circumstances, whether it's in criminal court in front of a jury. Juries hate it if you're mean to kids. Judges hate it. Kids will buck up on you and say the craziest things that you can't prepare for if you're not careful. So be cautious and be pleasant. And the other thing is just generally, if you're practicing law, Stu referenced the rules of juvenile procedure and our juvenile court rules. I don't care what court you're going into. If you're a litigator, know the rules, take the rules. Almost every court in Tennessee will have its own set of rules, in addition to either the rules of civil procedure, criminal procedure, the rules of federal procedure. You'll have local rules. So make sure you look those up, take them with you, read them, rely on them, check them often. Otherwise, you tend to get in those embarrassing situations that Stu referenced. If you don't know a rule here in Knoxville, walk to another lawyer you see and ask them if you think there might be a rule that you've missed. They'll help, I promise.
Sure. Okay, so Loretta, you mentioned that you were super shy back in the day and you kind of grew out of that. Stu, obviously you are not in any way shy. You're the exact opposite. So obviously there's different personalities in juvenile court, but what kind of qualities do you think would help people start to realize now that would make them successful in juvenile court? Loretta, we'll go with you first.
I mean, there's different personalities certainly that operate down there. Juvenile court is a unique place. So I would say being adaptable, being willing and able to take a file, change course in the course of a morning is important. I think being compassionate and being a good listener is important, because you're in a situation in juvenile court, regardless of the end of the hall, where you have emotions running high. You have families involved and there are consequences involved. So being mindful of that, I think is important. The other quality that I think is necessary is you have to have a backbone. And sometimes that is simply because emotions are so high and you have to deliver bad news and you cannot pull off the miracle that you're being requested to pull off. And no one wants to hear that when there's children involved. So be adaptable, be compassionate, but know when you have to stand up and shoot straight.
Sure, yeah. What about you?
Yeah, don't be an asshole to your opposing counsel. Let's start there, right? I'm telling you, it's shocking. It is absolutely, both Loretta and I teach law school, right? We're both adjuncts. It is absolutely shocking. I will see some of these students that I've had in class, so you'll see down in the courthouse, and all of a sudden they want to like buck up on older attorneys and try to tell the older attorneys what for. And it's like, what are you doing? Well, no, that's not how it works. Or they're just they're litigating the case and they're arrogant. I mean, when you're an older attorney and you see a brand new attorney in court, we've been there. So we know that the young attorneys don't know what they're doing yet. And if the young attorney's walking around like they know everything that's going on, or they know everything, that's going to make a bad day for them. I promise you that the old guard is going to step in and make an example out of them. So just don't be an asshole. Just get along, okay? Secondly, Be ready to try a case. Just be ready to go in there and try a case. I've probably, I'd say once a month, I will have times where I'll be in the hallway and the magistrate will say, go find Stanuszek, and they'll find me and they'll walk me into a courtroom and go, we're trying a case in 10 minutes. Go talk to your client. And I have 10 minutes to go out in the hallway, talk to my client, come back in and get ready to go. Why? Because I've been doing it long enough that I don't need more. I can try the case on that much prep. Okay. So be ready to go. Don't be so intimidated or nervous about the situation that you're not that you're not willing to do it. But just be ready to try a case. Third, be prepared. This happens with my incubator members all the time. Be prepared to get fired. You're going to get fired. It happens. And every single young attorney, the first time they get fired, from the ones I know, I'll get a phone call going, I got fired today for the first time, and they'll tell me what they did, and they feel terrible, and you can tell they feel guilty. And I'm like, yo, I get fired at least once or twice a month, and it's not like a badge of honor. It just happens. Some of these people are so oblivious to their situation that like Loretta said, if you're shooting them straight, they don't like to hear it. They want an attorney that's going to tell them what they want to hear is that they're in the right. And so you're going to get fired. So just don't take that personally at all, because they're probably going to fire the person after you too. And then lastly, have some sympathy for these people. Okay. A lot, the adults, especially, they have just lost their kids, and whether it's justified or not, these people deserve some respect regardless of what they did to lose their kids, and they at least deserve some sympathy. So have some sympathy for these people. I've been doing guardian ad litem work for a long time, but those people that do that exclusively, they only represent the best interest of the kids. That is a special group right there, because those people have to have a very caring heart to represent 150 kids and go meet with the kids all the time. I'm more geared toward representing the parents that have lost their kid, and that's kind of a different posture or different attitude. But regardless whether you're a guardian or you're a parent's attorney, you need to have sympathy for the situation.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into my next question, actually. So Stu, we'll stick with you. So we did the family law discussion last night, and something that I've heard parroted by family lawyers over the years I've been with the KBA is the secondary job of a family lawyer is a lot of the times being somewhat of a counselor to the families. So compare and contrast that to juvenile court, and how much of that do you really have to do, and how would it compare and contrast?
As a counselor, if I have a client come into my office for an hour meeting, I'm probably giving them legal advice for 10 minutes of the 60, and I'm spending the other 50 minutes listening to them just get things off their chest, right? It's couched in terms of they're giving me the facts behind the case, but really what it is they're getting stuff off their chest, and I'm sitting there listening, right, as an active listener. So yeah, that happens all the time. I will be the first to admit that I'm not good at that. Okay, I am more let's just go try it and do it. I'm not very good at being a listening ear. I'm just not good at it. But that is a big part of the practice.
Sure, yeah. Loretta, what about you?
I think that's true probably in any kind of area of law where you're litigating and you have a client, whether it's personal injury or juvenile or criminal defense or a landlord-tenant dispute. 90% of what your client is going to want to tell you will not impact your case. You will not care. And you'll care less and less the longer you practice, probably. But you learn to pluck the facts you need out of that story. The benefit to giving them the opportunity to unload and sort of treat it as a therapy session is that it does build trust with your client. And in my situation, and Stu's probably, most days your client is having one of the worst days of their life if they're in your office, or if you're hiding in a corner in the courthouse and having this conversation. So be sympathetic. I don't care what their situation is. Be sympathetic. It's just a case to you, but it feels like life or death to them sometimes. So that they are deserving of some respect and some sympathy and some grace and acceptance of those feelings. And sometimes that means you just sit and listen.
Yeah. I heard both of the attorneys last night said that the same thing. The people in there are having the worst day of their lives. That's great advice to at least be aware of that. So, okay, so a little change of pace here. Let's get away from some of the darker stuff. So students are always encouraged, Loretta, we'll stick with you. So students are always encouraged to seek out mentoring relationships. What kinds of things were you looking for in your current mentors, and what steps did you take while in law school to foster and build those relationships?
Well, and that's not something I really focused on in law school. I focused on surviving law school and not losing my marriage. I was married in after the first year.
Oh, Jody wouldn't do that. Come on now.
Wow, think of what he's been through since.
Oh, God love him.
So finding a mentor wasn't something I really focused on. I did shadow some lawyers and try to build some relationships with people who I knew were involved in the bar association. I went to some bar association events and tried to meet some people. But as soon as I graduated, I saw the error in my ways when I did not have a job lined up and had to go find one. And I literally would cold call people and ask if I could come have coffee or introduce myself. I went down to the courthouse and introduced myself to all the judges and their secretaries and legal assistants. And through that network, started to meet other lawyers. And then my mentor was my first employer, David Eldridge, is still my mentor. I called him yesterday for a mentoring session because I needed to brainstorm something, and there was no one better that I could think of to do that with. So just maintain those relationships. If you make those connections, it can be something as simple as an email or a coffee, or even if you haven't talked to someone that you want to mentor in a long time, just call them back up. I think you'll be all right.
Stu, as a person who mentors so many people and has a business in a way that mentors people, I hope you have a lot of advice for this one.
I don't know if I call it advice because we're talking about what I did back in the day, but here's what I did. So you got to understand, right? So my grade point was less than stellar. I wasn't the last in my class. I wasn't the last in our class, but if you took a shot for every person in our class behind me, you could drive sober, right? So I was at the very bottom there. So when I sent a resume to these law firms to try to get clerkships, they would just laugh at me, right? So what I did was all my friends after the first year of law school, none of them were getting clerkships because you're a rising 2L and you haven't really done anything yet, right? So, and I didn't want to work McDonald's. So what I did was I tried to think outside the box. So I went to all the 3Ls that I knew that had clerkships in Knoxville and found out which ones had taken jobs after graduation outside Knoxville, because that told me with the law firms that were looking for clerks. And then I asked them, how many of your law firms have replaced you with a new clerk? And that narrowed it down to about 3. And then I sent resumes to those 3 law firms and told their clerk, the 3L, put in a good word for me. And out of those 3 law firms, I got a clerkship. So even though my roommate, Jared Stone, who had a 3.95 coming out of his first year of law school, he was delivering pizzas at Domino's, but I was clerking with like a straight D average. Right. So I only bring that story up because as a clerk, I had 2 great mentors that I worked for the rest of my law school days, who eventually became my partners later on. But they were great mentors for me. They had been in the game one was been in the game for 50 years and the other at the time had been in the game for 40 years. And I could ask them questions and they would kind of show me how the sausage worked. And so I had people that I worked for as my mentors at the time. Nowadays, it's a lot different because I'm on the other side of that door. And there's a lot more opportunities, I think, for you guys than what we had, in that KBA does this buddy match thing where you can get matched up with attorneys if at any time you guys want to. And And if you guys want to go through your schools, your career services can match you up with a mentor in the local community. So I don't think current law students should have any problem finding mentors. You just got to make a phone call and have some initiative.
Sure thing. Yeah. I think that's what just about everybody has told me is so far is just call people, grab coffees, whatever it may be. Loretta, that was great advice too. So good stuff there. Okay. So you both now at this point have your own law firms. Stu, we'll stick with you. So why was starting your own firm important to you? When did you know you wanted to hang your own shingle? And what advice would you have to students who may be interested in a solo practice that will help them in the future?
Why was it important? Because I can't work for other people. It just doesn't work. I've tried it, right? When did I know? When I was my first year out of law school working at that big firm up in Ohio, I billed 2,400 hours, which is obscene. That's an obscene amount of hours in a windowless closet of a room that was 6 foot by 6 foot. And they paid me hardly anything. And I said, surely I can do better than this. Someone else is getting rich off of my back. And so I would say I knew I wanted to start my own law firm after about 6 months. I would say about a month before I did it, I got really, really nervous and had to be talked back off the ledge. But I decided to go through with it, and it was the best decision I've ever made professionally. Is doing it. I have, I'm 42, right? And so I've been practicing 17 years. We've been practicing 17 years. I have a ton of friends who work at very large law firms doing insurance defense, and they make great money, and they got golden handcuffs and can't leave. And every day they hate going to the office because they hate their law practice, but they're very comfortable and can't leave. Whereas when I come to the office every day, I have never left juvenile court where I didn't feel like that was a damn fun day. That was fun. That was a good day. And so if anybody wants mentorship or to learn how to do it, Loretta is a great resource. Matter of fact, Loretta teaches that at Duncan. So she's a great resource, and you have a lot of attorneys in town that are willing to help.
Yeah, Loretta?
Yeah, for me, it was about 5 years ago. And I think, frankly, it was a product of sort of getting burnt out on doing the same thing the same way every day. It had nothing to do with my firm environment. I love my firm and still do. But I just wanted to kind of do things a little differently. And I wanted to be able to make a little more time in my life for things. And the only way for me to really do that was to start answering only to myself. And I took a leap. It was not a well thought out decision when I made it. I'd been thinking about it for about 4 weeks, didn't have an office, didn't have a phone, didn't have any idea of what I was going to do. And then I just jumped. And I agree with Stu. I do love working for myself because it gives me a lot more flexibility than you have when you're working for someone else. I always knew that I was never going to be a big firm lawyer. I didn't want to be just a number, another associate churning in the basement doing document review until my fingers bled. So I always knew that I was geared more towards small firm or solo practice. I will say, as a solo practitioner, it can get kind of isolating and kind of lonely. So if you're going to do that, I encourage you to keep your network intact, find other lawyers who have similar practice years under their belt, or maybe people you went to law school with or slightly older, and make sure to connect so that you can reach out to people if you find yourself in a situation that you can't quite figure out yourself. To me, that's the biggest challenge. The other challenge, and this is probably a challenge for Steve because he hustles like no other lawyer I've ever met, is the tendency to overcommit because you're your own boss and your own, you are responsible for your own firm. And there's a pressure that comes with that to keep going, more clients, more cases, keep the work going, work more hours, because there is no one but you to be responsible for those things. So plan well, don't succumb to that tendency if you're anything like me.
Yeah, that's great advice. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left. So if anybody has any other questions they want to throw in right now, I'll try to for sure to address those before we get out. So, okay, so Loretta, we'll stick with you. So looking back on law school, is there anything that you wish you would have done or planned for while you were there that would have helped better prepare you for your practice today?
Probably everything is the short answer to that. I think I would have relaxed just a little bit more and not put quite so much pressure on myself. I understand the sort of the feeling when you've decided to go to law school. At that point, you've committed. You're in law school. You're really committed. You're finishing law school, and the bar's staring you down. So you're super committed, and you have no idea what plan B is if it doesn't go well. So I would have relaxed a little bit more, knowing that it's all doable. I'm prepared. I would have spent more time with lawyers and in courtrooms, in clinic, things like that, so that I would know the answers to all the questions they don't teach you in law school. And I would have wished that Stu and I did not have the benefit of the kinds of classes that we both teach now.
Absolutely.
Which is, it would have been fantastic to have that. But if your law school offers a court, any kind of practice course like court practice or law office management, take that class. It will serve you so much better than like commercial. So if you have those kinds of electives, take it.
Great. Yeah. Steve, what about you?
Well, judging by my grade point, I don't think I could say I should have relaxed more.
Mine either, Stu. I was not in the top of that class either.
Oh man.
I couldn't have been sober, but you know.
I remember coming back my first day, my 2L year, walking down the hallway and seeing our dean of admissions in the hallway, and she was surprised I was there. She thought I had dropped out. I remember she sees me in the hallway and she turned around and goes, "Hey, Stu's back! Get him a mailbox!" They thought I had dropped out. My grade point was so low. So I don't think I could have relaxed more. The hell would I have done different back in law school? This is going to fall on deaf ears because you're law students and we were law students and we all cared about our grade points back when we were in law school. Even me with my D's, I didn't like having D's. But just to understand, the people at the top of your class ain't necessarily going to be the most successful attorneys, and the people at the bottom of your class ain't going to be the least successful attorneys, right? I'll put what I've done in my 17 years up against damn near anybody, and I was a terrible law student. So I guess my advice is don't take your failures or your successes on your exams too seriously. All right. It's important if you're trying to get a job at some of these tier 1 law firms, right? But if you are serious about, say, doing juvenile court work, what we're talking about here today, you're really talking about hanging your own shingle, starting your own firm, or working at a smaller firm. And to those firms, grade point means far less than personability, likability, and the confidence enough to go down to court, handle a case without your senior partner having to hold your hand the whole time. All right. So don't take it so seriously. Enjoy your 3 years, because I'm telling you, when you get out and start studying for that bar, you're taking it up another level. And once you pass the bar and you're practicing, it goes way. Maybe I'm wrong. Loretta could have a different opinion on this, but your stress level is going way up.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Steve, we'll stick with you. So did you juggle classes while working as an intern before finishing law school? And if so, can you describe that?
I'm sorry?
Did you juggle classes while working as an intern before finishing law school? And if so, can you describe that?
You asking me if I clerked while I was in law school?
Yeah, essentially,
I did. I clerked probably 10 to 20 hours a week as a 2L and the same as a 3L, and then I clerked full time in the summertime.
And would you recommend it for everybody?
Well, I recommend it. I had to do it in order to pay rent, right? So it wasn't a choice. If it wasn't clerking, I would have been delivering pizzas. Yeah. So it didn't really matter. No, I recommend it. You're gonna learn more. I learned more clerking than I did my third year of law school. Third year of law school, I was sleeping through half my classes, right? I learned more going on the courthouse with my mentors and watching them trying stuff than I did in law school. So yeah, absolutely recommend it. Now, in retrospect, as someone who's been doing this for 17 years, if young Stu could have taken the summer off and just sat around on the strip and drank beers at O'Charlie's, I may have told young Stu to do that. But I don't know if it would have been a good career move.
Right. Loretta, anything to add?
No, I think you should clerk if you can. Just be upfront about how many hours a week you can work, because nothing makes me crazier than having a clerk or an intern say I can work X hours a week and then they don't show up for those hours. But just be clear on the front end. Stu is 100% correct. You will learn more from watching someone actually practice law than you will learn in law school. Unlike Stu, I did take my summers off in law school. I had that luxury and I missed summers. So if you can take some time off, I suggest you do, but definitely get the experience. Get it anywhere you can.
I miss my summers too.
Me too. I think we all do. Okay, so practicing in Knoxville. So Stu, I know you've said you've practiced elsewhere. Loretta, you've been in Knoxville the whole time, right? But
I've been in Knoxville and the surrounding area the whole time.
Gotcha. But I assume you both have Stu has firsthand experience, but enough experience to speak to this. So how does practicing in Knoxville compare or differ to practicing in other larger cities such as Cleveland, Nashville, Chattanooga, or Atlanta, the cities that some of the students may be looking to move to after law school? Loretta, we'll start with you.
Okay. Knoxville is a unicorn. And I say that because of the lawyers in our bar. Stu is not underestimating how cordial we are to each other, how respectful we try to be to each other, how helpful we try to be to each other. And that is not the case in every city. Every city has its own culture of practice. And this is one of the reasons it's really important to observe people practicing law. I've had cases in Memphis where my opposing counsel was incredibly contentious with me, and I'm like, what is happening here? That's not how we do things. We don't notice depositions without discussing it and things like that in Knoxville. So I would suggest you find someone who is practicing in that community and sort of learn the culture, because it's going to be different. Nashville is sort of a mix, I would say, of kind of Knoxville and Memphis. There's both sides of that. And it also can differ in your different practice areas. So again, a mentor will really help you out. And I suspect if you call someone up for instance, from your university, find a recent graduate, they have a directory up in career service and an alumni office, find someone who's recently relocated to that city and call them up and just ask them about what the environment's like. You will find someone who will answer you.
Yeah. What about you?
I think Loretta's dead on. And you got to remember, practicing law is a business too, right? So some of the counties have rules. I'm not going to say that are intended to shelter the local bar, but they have rules that aid the local bar. So for example, Memphis has a rule where they will send out notice of the hearing. And if you have a case in Memphis, you'll get a notice of the hearing. You might only get 6 days notice of this hearing coming up. To get it continued, you have to file a motion and you have to appear in front of the judge to get the hearing date moved. So if I'm sitting on a Monday and I received the notice for a hearing on a Friday, and I have court in Knoxville on Friday, sometime between Monday and Friday, I have to file a motion and drive to Memphis and get a hearing set to get my Friday hearing moved. We don't do that in Knoxville. I don't see that in Knoxville. We get notice hearings, and if you can't make the hearing, you pick up a phone and say, let's move the hearing date. No one consulted me on my hearing date, so we're going to move a hearing date by agreement. It is a very, very cordial, professional bar that we have here. Everyone works, for the most part, everyone works very well together. And that goes for all the surrounding counties too. I say not Knoxville, adjacent counties, all the way up east. Absolutely.
Yeah, we had 6 of these discussions in the last winter. This is the 4th one, and it's about 20 attorneys so far, and every one of them has said basically the exact same thing. So Loretta describing it as a unicorn seems to be pretty accurate. So to be lucky that we have that here. So we're about out of time, and I like to kind of ask this as a last question. You may not have anything at all. It's kind of an easy question, but the world's kind of been changing a lot in the last couple of years. So Stu, we'll start with you. So what do you see as the quote next big development in juvenile court?
Oh, it's already happened. It's Zoom. By far Zoom. I can this is Knox County, not necessarily the adjacent counties, but for the most part, I can have a party or witness attend a hearing now by Zoom simply by asking the other attorneys if they're okay. The court's okay with it. So, if I have a client who oversleeps and it's 9:15 and they're not down at the courthouse, and I call them up and say, where the hell are you? And they said, I overslept. I'll say, well, I can ask the court to let them attend by Zoom. And a lot of times the court will agree to that. Or they have work and they can't get work off. And before Zoom came around, if they didn't have work off, I'm trying a case without someone sitting next to me. But with Zoom now, they can attend the hearing by Zoom. And I can text with them while it's going on. It has made a world of difference practicing law down in juvenile court by having that ability.
Sure thing. Fred, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And putting my criminal defense bar hat on for a second, that may be a slightly unpopular opinion, but I like the convenience of Zoom. For many of the things that we do every day, it's so much less time consuming to jump on Zoom, handle a case. Your client's gone, everybody saves time, misses less work, and it just moves the docket faster. So for many things, I think we will see Zoom continue. I think the students we're talking to will be the first generation of heavy Zoom users in the practice of law.
Yeah, I think it's here to stay.
I think so too. Now that it can backfire. I had a juvenile court matter where I had a witness on Zoom. Thankfully, after the judge had ruled, decided to spark up on camera.
Oh, Lord.
So there's a downside.
Celebrating
prepare
that
them
move,
well.
huh?
That's not good, but that's not the worst thing I've heard happening on Zoom amongst the different professions. So yeah,
It's
good.
just
Good
a different
advice.
level of preparedness.
Yeah. Okay, well, that is it. I appreciate everything, guys. I can't, for Aaron and Jessica, thank you for being here. I couldn't think of 2 attorneys to better speak to those practicing in juvenile court. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to them both. Just put your name out there. Go visit Stu at juvenile court. I've heard him tell everybody that he talks to just come down here. I'll take care of you. And great resources here. So Loretta and Stu, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully see everybody soon.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
guys
everybody.
very much.